22 years later, suddenly a quiet Indian city with palaces and lakes becomes famous for a tragic reason, like Chernobyl, like the 3 Mile Island, like Pompeii. And December 2nd, 2006 now marks the 22nd anniversary of the world's worst chemical disaster. And Bhopal is a chasm that separates the past from the future. It is an event that forever changed the path of chemical history. The story goes on. In July 2004, Indian courts awarded an extra settlement of funds, 327 million. 20 years later, one wonders what the Indian government did with 327 million for 20 years. Shortly after the gas release, Union Carbide launched an aggressive effort to identify the cause. And apparently the conclusion they came up to was it was caused by deliberate sabotage. The settlement ultimately amounted to $500 per person. And this is after 20 years, when people who were affected by the gas had died. So when we talk about new horizons in public health, there are certain issues that come to my mind, and one of them is governance of the host country that has a multinational opening up a plant in their country. The involvement of governments to make appropriate regulations is very important. Town planning, which is sadly lacking in many Indian cities, is another very important issue. Industries with hazardous materials should be located in remote areas, and they should establish a green belt around these plants. They should have mass-scale evacuation procedures and contingency plans to reduce casualty and seriousness of an accident. A disaster preparedness and backup plan for failures. Policies and accountability of multinational corporations is another issue. Multinationals should incorporate in safety procedures and processes, routine checks, disaster recovery plans. They should improve the health, safety, and environmental management programs, safety procedures, education, training, identifying runaway reactions and other problematic scenarios, maintain integrity of safety systems at all times, reduce inventories of hazardous materials on the work site, use less hazardous chemicals in the manufacturing of products, design processes that incorporate less hazardous chemicals, involve local people in risk management and acceptance, appropriate transfer of technology and knowledge of transfer, including all safety aspects from highly industrialized nations to emerging countries, and prevent double standards of design, safety, accountability, and victim compensation. After the gas disaster in 1986, the American Public Health Association's Bhopal Working Group submitted its report. The US Congress passed the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act in 1986. The Clean Air Act amendments were made in 1990. OSHA 1992 and EPA 1996 issued regulations requiring companies to analyze hazards of their processes, preserve safety during process changes, perform preventive maintenance and certification and training, investigate and document safety incidents, and plan for emergencies. However, these rules were conventional. To be covered under any standards, the facility needs to use at least a threshold of 100 chemical substances. Therefore, many chemical processes may still not be covered by these safety rules. And this is of interest to students of public health who are interested in control and prevention. There are further reading references, and I could give it to them if they're interested. President Bush appointed Caroline Merritt as the new chairman and CEO of the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. And the CSB has the authority to recommend needed safety improvements to the US EPA and OSHA organization, centers based upon its investigations of accidents and hazards. The CSB investigates up to a dozen major chemical accidents each year and reports its findings to the public and Congress. It evaluates how effective OSHA and EPA regulations are and have uncovered potentially serious gaps, hazards of uncontrolled reactions that cause explosions or toxic releases were not addressed by OSHA until recently. There was the International Campaign for Justice and other NGOs who have taken upon themselves to address some of the challenges. And some of the points that come up is international liabilities. This is a legal issue. CEOs and corporations should not be allowed to abscond from legal proceedings levied against them in other nations. Environmental justice. Poor indigenous communities and emerging countries should not be targeted with polluting facilities, dangerous technologies, and other threats to health and community. The right to know. People should have easy access to information about potential or current threats to the environment, health, and quality of life. However, in 2006, terrorism poses a problem for this kind of freedom. Those who are responsible for polluting the environment should be responsible for cleaning up the pollution. Conclusions? Well, there are new vistas in public health and disaster planning and mass-scale evacuation plans that have come up. And I would like to ask the forum here, what issues do you see that can be done in the future for international health? And how does this impact you in your career facing issues of globalization? So on that note, I shall end this talk. And after we've had a discussion and questions and answers, I would like to spend 1 minute standing to respect those who died today, 22 years ago.